Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Accuracy in America. This is December 18th, 2025, and episode number 345. I'm your host, Don Irvine, joined by my co host, Brian McNichol.
Good morning, everybody, and Merry Christmas, week from Christmas Day.
Right. Yeah, we're not going to be on next week because it's too tumultuous for me, at least. So, are you going to be traveling next week?
Yeah, going to Louisiana, and then we might have a little trip beyond that. So,
Hopefully the weather will be halfway decent. Today looks like a halfway decent day here.
yeah, it's supposed to be like in the mid 70s for Christmas.
Whoa.
I go for it. I'm fine with it. So
Yeah, that's
it's
nice.
supposed to be like in the 60s here.
Yeah.
So we're supposed to get a major shot of warm up coming up. So
I can live with
I
that.
can dig it. Yeah.
All right. So today we were going to do something a little bit different. Uh we were going to do it. We're going to do a top 10 of 2025. We were going to originally present our own top 20, 10s and discuss them, but we've switched that here at the last minute, and we'll just go with my top 10 and let Brian rip it apart. And disagree with it because I know that there was not there because I throw in some other stuff in there too. So, I probably would have had. I think we would have diverged on several different things. One thing about a top 10, I I don't know if I like them or hate them or just kind of between, because they're subjective to me, and it's really I make a top 10. I'm like, okay, is that the real order? Not necessarily, right? I mean,
Right.
you might agree with some of them, but you might disagree with the placement of those, and that's actually perfectly fine. Um, and then if you've got some other things that you think ought to go in on there, we can probably throw that in as well. So let's do this, and we'll see how long the show takes. It may be a short show today as a result, but something I thought would be a little bit fun for the end of the year. We've only got one more show to go here at the very end. So number 10, Epstein files. So I put that in there. You know, I've had a lot of mixed emotions about these Epstein files because this has been a big news item. It seems to me that the media has made it a big deal, and they're looking for that smoking gun with President Trump, and they've really been frustrated by not finding it
Right.
overall. There's been a lot of cat and mouse and some other things going on there as to who had what files and is he in this thing or whatever. But I think President Trump has largely come away from this pretty much unscathed, and has from a media going after Trump type of phase. This really hasn't amounted to anything. But I don't know. What about I don't know about the bigger picture necessarily. It already took down Larry Summers, and we talked about that in weeks past. But I think the Democrats don't seem to be playing that up quite as much as they were than they were a few weeks ago.
Their media has backed off of it because they realize that Trump may be in there, but he's not. He didn't have anything to do with Epstein's young girls, the victims, and all that stuff. And the WAPO has reported on this, said he didn't have anything to do with it. New York Times has said he didn't have anything to do with it. First Trump DOJ, Biden DOJ, second Trump DOJ. The victims, their lawyers, their families all agree that Trump didn't have anything to do with it. Okay, so what makes that so that it's sort of dropped off the scale of things that they talk about all the time, because the media organizations have realized the jackpot is not out there, right? They're not gonna like, oh, they finally gave us the file that says what all Trump did. There's no file that says what all Trump did. The question is then, right, they have been a little squirrely about releasing all this stuff, right? So if Trump's completely not guilty, why don't you just put it all out there? Well, okay, so why don't they? What are the possible reasons? I think one of them is the left rejects this one, but I don't really know of any factual points that would rule this out. And that is, Trump was a rat, right? He's the one that told them who all was doing this, right? A lot of those lists are assembled lists of people who went to the island and did this and that and the other, from information, started with information they got from Trump. So if it all comes out, then Trump ratted a bunch of people out, you know. And so, no one really wants, I tattled on 400 people or whatever, some of the most powerful people in the world. I'm the one who turned them all in. So, I mean, that's a possible explanation. I'm not saying it is, but that's a possible explanation. But it is, you can see that the leftist media has backed off of how they talk about this because, for one thing, he's winning lawsuits and all that kind of stuff. So, it's kind of hard to, you don't want to be going against him because he will sue you. He sued the BBC for $10 billion last week. Now a word on that. That's not one of your top 10, right? The BBC. Right. Okay. So while we're here, right. $10 billion is a lot of money. Okay. But what they did, what the BBC did, and they did do it, there's no denying that they did do it, is they spliced video together to make it look like that he said on January 6th for people to go down to the Capitol and attack it and get violent. Right. I mean, and that's not what happened. I mean, it's like one thing, we all like, I interview people all the time, especially I do these little sports stories for people. And, not every 17-year-old kid has perfect grammar, right, that I talk to. So sometimes I fix their grammar, right? But I don't change the meaning of what they say, right? They said, Joe is good. Joe did a good job. I don't have Joe did a bad job, right? That's dishonest. But that's what they've done. It's dishonest. Now, I don't know if he'll get 10 billion. But the funniest thing about it is, the Brits see it as an attack on their country. It's like, don't do this to us. Like, we didn't do, we'll stand up for our media company that we pay for. We stand up they're standing up strong for state media, state-owned media. So it's like, that's a mindset itself that's really dangerous. So, I hope that, I hope he gets something out of it so that it teaches the BBC a lesson. Right. And I hope the people of the UK look at it and see that, it's time to, those guys need to stand on their own if they're going to do stuff like that.
Yeah, well, the thing about that suit too, though, just is that, this is Trump going big. I mean, you put an outrageous amount of money out on the table like that. You say, this is what you're going to do. Well, whether or not you get any part of that at all is not necessarily as relevant as the fact that you've raised an issue that nobody was talking about. And just reminding people too that Britain has got, as you said, they have state-owned media. The households in Britain have to pay for this garbage.
Right. There's an actual set-aside fee for this. So,
yeah.
I guess that's what they're mad about is, the thing we paid all this tax money for is in trouble. But, don't falsify things. Tell the truth.
Yeah. Yeah,
that's
seriously. Right. Yeah, that's the thing is, it's like, in what universe does this state-owned media model really supposed to work in what is supposedly a free society? I mean, it's just, it's just nonsense at this point in time.
Could no media company make money in the UK?
Yeah, right. Why can't they stand alone? Why do they need this subsidy?
That's right.
It's just terrible. All right. So, number 9, I didn't know really what to call it. So I said, EVs lose their luster. So, under the Biden administration, we had all these things. CAFE standards were changed. You had to be, your average fuel economy had to be, in like 50 miles a gallon by 35 or something like that.
Yeah.
And, all these kinds of things, which meant that, it was going to be like the great electrification of cars in America and everything like that. But, as we have said on this program time and time again, part of the problem with this is that EVs, and Elon Musk, to his credit, he built his fortune, he made his fortune off of Tesla, off of electric vehicles, but he wouldn't have been able to be as successful without a government subsidy, a very big one,
Right.
by per vehicle. And the government, they expanded the subsidy. They made that they bent over backwards to make this industry succeed. We saw all these car makers falling over themselves, right? GM, Ford, Stellantis. They were, they all they couldn't get to EVs and try to ditch the internal combustion engine cars fast enough. What happened? A lot of them sat around on the lot. Ford famously, with their truck, their EV truck, they were losing like $15,000 or more per vehicle sold. They were losing money hand over fist. People didn't take to this as much as they thought. And once these subsidies ended, which was really at the end of September, there's been a dramatic drop. We saw the big run up to catch the subsidy, get the tax credit, and then once the tax credit went away, boom, go down the drain goes. Now we got to give the Trump administration credit for trying to level this playing field and saying, no, we're not going to do this anymore. Embrace fossil fuels, embrace an internal combustion engine, and get rid of that tax break, that tax subsidy, and some things that I've been complaining about for a long time is that let's see these cars compete on their own without government assistance. And what has happened? Voila! These companies have completely reversed course, pretty for the most part, and said, we're reducing, if not eliminating, our EVs and our battery capacity, and we're going back and we're going to build more gasoline powered cars.
Yeah, it's a two-edged sword, but yeah, that's right. So so they tried to do this, and some of it was done legislatively, but it's just part of and I don't know, I hope this isn't in your list either, but the environmental policy of the administration, right? They have, they took away the endangerment finding. So carbon is no longer looked at as regulated as a dangerous chemical. They've opened it up where you can do the pipelines again, right? Because you have people, the Biden administration, they were saying, we're not going to approve any pipelines, right? And so, New England's up there saying we need gas in the winter, guys. And, and so they kind of rescued the Democrats from some of their really serious planned stupidity on this. And, it's just part of like making environmental policy work for Americans, things are so much better than they were just a few months ago on that front. And this was part of that. And, what's happening now is, Musk is not going to go broke with Tesla, right? The market, there's still a market there. There's still people that want the cars, right? But the supply is going to reflect the demand more closely than it does now, right? I mean, you had Ford and Chevy and all these guys jumping in to trying to make these cars, like you said, and then that was more than people wanted, and that was false economic signals sent by government fiat, right? So now the government fiat is gone, the government order is gone, so they stand on their own in the markets. Musk's genius is that he figured out that the government overpays for stuff. It doesn't really know what things cost, so it overpays. So every field he's in is backed by major government subsidies, EVs, solar, space, the boring company. Who's buying boring, right? Who's buying boring tunnels? It's not me and you, right? It's governments, right? Big government projects or big, huge construction projects where he can also make money. But all of his things depend on government subsidies. So that's not a bug, that's a feature for him because it means more profit. So every time you take one away, like his comments on the EVs, he's not mad. Everybody's like, he's going to be furious. Trump, what's he going to say to Trump? Trump takes his subsidies away. It's like he's expecting, he's the Doge guy, right? He's trying to find the waste in government. He was expecting it. He's not upset by it.
Yeah, look, I mean, the thing about it too is that Musk is smart. He's absolutely brilliant, and Tesla as a vehicle, the whole vehicle thing, is no longer his main deal anymore. I mean, they will continue to pump out vehicles, but they really have they made some minor changes, but they haven't like introduced something super new that wows everybody. They haven't really come up with a new model. They've just tweaked the old models. So he's already kind of moving off of that. He kind of moved off of solar panels into the EV space. He then moved from there. He was toying with the Boring Company, as I said, and then SpaceX has been a big deal where he may take that public, next year, and that'll be maybe more money. So he's already pivoting past that. Plus, rather than worry about sales of EVs, what the other thing is he promoting? Driverless vehicles, right? He's now trying to compete with Waymos and things like that. He already has a lot of that technology, so it's not a huge leap for him to do, to actually move into that field. We don't have that many cities that have Waymos yet, because it is a long process to kind of road test them, make sure they can handle the roads, they don't do stupid, goofy things, and get into accidents and whatnot. But most people I've heard from have seen, they love the Waymos. I mean, compared to say an Uber, because they don't have to talk to anybody.
Yeah.
Some people just don't want that conversation. They don't want to be bothered. They just want to get in a car and go from A to B. And Waymos are kind of geofenced, so they're only going to go in a certain area anyway. They're not going to be as widespread as Uber. But Google or Alphabet, has shown that they're making this a successful model. And Elon says there's, they're hardly in any cities. This field is wide open.
Yeah.
If I perfect my technology, I can go in and I can go ahead and make some money off of this, because it is starting to turn into a money-making operation finally for these car manufacturers. And on the climate thing too, it's just like, this also, the climate policy, the effect of that too also goes to these corporations, right? One of the things that the Biden administration, the Obama administration, they kept talking about, well, you have to talk about climate risk in your proxy statements and all this kind of stuff. That's going away. They don't have to actually put a cost figure for that, which was a dumb thing to do anyway.
I mean, SEC had a rule that you couldn't say anything against climate policy.
Yeah.
You couldn't say global warming in any kind of corporate communication. If you were listed on the stock market, you couldn't criticize the global warming consensus. I mean, that's not that's nonsense. The other one, they've overturned West Virginia versus EPA, Massachusetts versus EPA, and Massachusetts was a key case where, that gave that's what they call Chevron deference, right? So where you basically said if a government agency says something and you go, you say, hey, they're wrong, then the government is required to consider the government agency's version the truth and drub you, right? So that's gone. You have to actually prove your cases now. So, I mean, these are huge things that the green left used to beat us over the head for 20, 30, 40 years that are just gone in a poof, just gone in less than a year. So, major accomplishments by Trump on those areas.
All right, we'll move on. Number 8 on my list, how defunding of National Public Radio and Corporation Public Broadcasting. I mean, this could have been way higher as well, depending how you look at it. I thought this was a big deal for conservatives. This has been something we've been trying to get for decades.
Yeah, 40 years.
Yeah, and it all occurred this year, and we, Corporation Public Broadcasting actually, closed its doors, I believe, right? I mean, they basically shut down.
Well, they're supposed to complete the shutdown at the end of the year.
Okay, they're going to shut down by the end of the year.
Yeah, and so we're getting close now. Yeah, I think it's somebody ought to go look through the window, see what's going on. Because there's talk of like trying to bring it back, and there's some people who want to throw it in funding for 2026 and so forth. These, we still have to have a funding bill, right? We only ended the shutdown for a few weeks, so they still got to agree on funding and tax extenders and all that stuff. So, the war is not quite over on that one, but that is a great achievement for conservatives. What is it? The Virginia Religious Freedom Act, right? Is passed by the House of Burgesses back in the 1780s, right? It says it is to make somebody fund the propagation of views they don't agree with is tyranny, and it is. And that was the objection. It's like if you're gonna be a abjectly leftist news source, then it's not fair to get the tax. You can do that, and freedom of press, right? Have at it, but it's not fair to do it with taxpayer money, right? Because half of us are not that, and so it's high time and coming. It won't kill them. It won't put them out of business. They'll have, they're pretty good at raising money over there. Some states give them money. There's probably even some federal money they can still get in grant programs and so forth. Hopefully that will be shut off. But it is a great victory, and let them pay for their own deal. Also shows that a few committed people is all it takes, right? We didn't have enough committed people till this session of Congress. In the last Congress, there were two members of the House who were interested in this, and not really any members of the Senate. This Congress, we had about 8 or 10 who were interested in it, and that was enough to do it, right?
Yeah. No, I mean it's been a tremendous victory, and National Public Radio is not dead, but it's wounded. To lose the government money that they did, and it's not forever at this point either. But they have to fill in the gap, and then try to figure these things out. But I take great joy in seeing them, getting less of my dollars. With all their propaganda that they tend to propagate on the air, so
Right.
I'm a happy camper.
Yeah, and then we owe debt of thanks to Uri Berliner, who was the producer, NPR's producer, wrote a piece in the fall of 2024, saying, NPR has gone so far left that it's losing its audience. He's like, I always pictured, the guy in the combine out in Indiana picking crops and listening to NPR. We get people who write us and say, yeah, I'm running my combine, and I'm sitting there at the wheel of a combine listening to your stories and whatnot. And when it was stories and it was tales and it was interesting stuff and it was about art and so forth, you don't have any objection, right? Everybody's sure, whatever, But when it's relentlessly political and relentlessly leftist and relentlessly anti-Trump in the most cruel and vile ways, and you can't blame people who are on the other side of that for saying we shouldn't pay for it, right? And that's what happened.
Right. Okay. So another one that's related. I broke these up, but you could combine them just as easily as well. The dismantling of U.S. aid, AID, and of the Department of Education. Also, very big, developments with the Trump administration. Things that should have been done a long time ago. And when the Education Department thing, too. Ronald Reagan wanted to get rid of the department. And here we are, 45 years later, and it finally, showing that it's going to happen, or at least it's going to be greatly weakened. Nevertheless, and he's got an education secretary that is trying to help make that happen as much as possible.
Right, because when Reagan tried to do it, he had appointed Bill Bennett to be the head of the Department of Education. And the Senate said, if he's for dismantling the department, if he's for dismantling the department, we're not gonna confirm him. He's got to change that view, right? And Bill Bennett told Reagan, find somebody else. Don't make it me. I'll get out of the way. Don't worry about confirming me. Don't pick someone who promises to keep it alive. It's more important that it be killed than that I get to be Secretary of Education. So but Reagan didn't take that advice, and Bill Bennett presided over it, and he did the best he could. We've gone away and we've come back, and it's done nothing to help. But what it does mainly is messes up college with pro leftist regulations. handles the Title I stuff, handicap people, poor schools, people who don't speak English, all that kind of stuff. Okay, all of that can be done without a big edifice in Washington. Very good move, very necessary move. All the duties, the statutory duties, were all easily reassigned to other agencies with expertise in those matters. So we never needed it. The other one you said was USAID. What we discovered is, the thing you always hear is like we were given $5 billion $5 billion or something like that for condoms in Africa, right? And gay shows in Mozambique, and drag dancers in Romania, and all this stuff. Big Bird for Ecuador. You're 40 trillion in debt, and you're buying Big Bird for Ecuador. But what really has happened is, what happened is we didn't really give $5 billion worth of condoms to Africa, right? We gave $1 billion, and $4 billion was kicked back to people here who facilitated all this, right? And got it through Congress and kept it alive, and kept the nosies out of looking at it and so forth. So, you've cut off their slush fund. You notice that like a lot of these people they're not operating anymore, right? The No Kings people, they didn't really have a lot of money, all these little protest movements, they're sort of dried up. A lot of little leftist stuff, they don't have the money for it anymore, because money came from came from USAID. It's even, some of it has gone into their election war chest, right? So you're paying for tax dollars to fund Democrat elections, to raise your taxes, right? So a beautiful thing happened there. That is a huge development. I don't know where it should rank, but that's a ginormous development, that they have cut off the funding stream for all the leftists, not NGOs and all that kind of stuff. That's a huge, huge, huge thing.
All right. Also, somewhat related, but I felt it was worth its own slot, was Doge, which you've been mentioned a couple of times here already. This is something, it didn't, Elon Musk, they didn't really complete the full task necessarily, but they really shook up government and showed that, trying to shake some of the excess out of there. Now, both of us know that the federal government is it's too big. There's a lot of waste, fraud, and abuse in there. And there are people who are working, getting paid good salaries, but doing relatively little work. As you've been talking about some of these other things, as we've been going down the list, the amount of fraud, waste and fraud that goes on through government is just, incredible. Just as an aside, I had lunch with one of my financial advisors yesterday, and he was saying that he says we're probably kind of stupid. He says we didn't realize how easy it was to defraud the government. He was referring to the Somalis. This is like, and the PPP loans and all this kind of stuff. It's like, yeah, look, go ahead. You can do all kinds of things, and the government will send you all kinds of money, and sometimes they'll catch you. Most of the time they won't.
Right. It's worth the risk. And they don't do much to you,
right,
if they catch you. What have they done to the Somalis, right?
Yeah, and what are they going to? They probably. They've already distributed or spent the money. It's not like you're going to be able to get the money back from them, right?
Right.
So
Tim Walz, he doesn't even want to try. He doesn't think they did anything wrong.
Yeah. We'll give you a mulligan on that. Please don't do it again.
Okay. So here's the thing. Yes, they did not go through every single agency, but they provided a model that is applicable to every agency, to go through there and see what you're doing, what really matters, and, what could be done without, right? Government, we all have to pay for it. So it should be operated as efficiently as it can, right? We certainly do, it's one thing we can argue over what all needs to be paid for, but I think we could all argue that it ought to be, as efficiently done as it can. So, I think that's where, I think that that's a model that they can keep applying across government in different ways and find all kinds of waste. And it was one of those things, we haven't really scraped it for a long time to see what waste is in it. And, if you don't remain vigilant, it's like mowing your yard, right? If you don't remain vigilant, you have a huge problem, right? It's not just last week's growth of grass, it's last month's growth of grass. Then you're into a big problem. And so that's what they're up against. And I applaud them for trying to do something about it.
Yeah. And look, Musk took, I think some personal hits for that. The liberals, reacted, in their typical fashion, is that the ones that own Teslas, either got rid of their Teslas or stuff like
Put
that.
the sticker on there that, I bought it before I knew how bad he was.
Right.
And all that.
Yeah. And all they their reaction was rather comical. But I mean, Musk has enough money that doesn't really matter to him if a few liberals, whatever, get their dander up or whatever. But then he's returned to business, and things have gone well for him, since he returned to the company. I think the company's stock price, it had dipped a decent amount while he was serving, and running around with Trump and everything like that. But he had a lot. One thing he did get was a lot of great pictures with him and his son in the Oval Office and a lot of these other. It was pretty amusing to watch him. But he's committed to a lot of things, and he also is, one of his passions now is, just aside, is population, is the replacement rate. He tweets about this on a regular basis, about this problem worldwide of we're going, this is going to be a very big problem. It already is developing that way in Europe and Asia, and America is kind of, right on the edge of replacement rate, and people don't understand, what's going to happen, 20 years from now. This is not going to be pretty.
Right. That's a major thing. And it's like, your communities die, your things that you share die because there's no one there. So,
right.
It's a big problem. And he's put his finger on a big problem. And, I think he's gone around trying to solve it a little bit too. He's got a bunch of he practiced what he preaches on that.
How many women and how many kids?
Yeah. See, but that's the other thing, though. It's not really a body count, right? What we need is kids and good families.
Yeah.
So
right.
The other,
you want the whole nuclear family kind of a deal rather than this, rather than his approach. But you can't say that he hasn't done his part for repopulating.
That's right. But I mean, that's the other thing that's kind of a big story this year is there's been a lot of talk about, hey, men, go honor your wife and be at home and get out of the clubs and quit drinking and be a good dad and take care of your business, right? That's a big movement in America now. There's a lot of publicity for it everywhere you look.
Yep. All right, number 5. Another one I thought was worth it here too. So it was the colleges and universities settling with the Trump administration for anti-Semitic behavior on campus, and also taking away the DEI, and the research grants and all these kinds of things. Really put it out there. It's remarkable how many of the big schools actually went ahead and came to an agreement with the administration, paid a big fine. They got their grants, some of the grant money restored, but they're hopefully creating a safer environment for Jewish students on those campuses, as well as just snuffing out DEI. Now the problem with DEI, I think we've both seen, is that sometimes they've been trying to get around that by relabeling it as something else, but for the most part, it's really been, DEI has been under tremendous pressure, and college universities, they take that on, at their own risk now. They don't. None of these guys really wants to cross Trump.
Right. That's right. They realize he does have a lot of power and he can take a lot of money from. I think one of the biggest stories, kind of within that story, is there was I guess it was a turning point event at Cal Berkeley. and the protesters tried to keep them from having the event, and the cops protected them and got them into the place where they were having the event. 1,400 people in a 1,200 seat auditorium packed to the rafters. So they had the event, right? They didn't. The left was unable to prevent the right from having the event, as they have prevented it so many other places and times, right? So that was a big accomplishment. Also, the Department of Justice, the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice, Harmeet Dillon's part of it, is going after the people who tried to stop it, right? The people who got violent at Cal and tried to prevent them from having the event. I think that's the important thing, is the people are willing to use violence to stop this. Then the government has to be willing to use force to enforce the First Amendment, right? To let them have their say. So I think that the government actually stepping up and doing that in Berkeley, California, was a sort of a turning point, if you will, on that issue.
Yeah. Well, that was considering that you have no idea what my top 10 list is, what a perfect segue into my next one, which is the assassination of Charlie Kirk. Right. So this was a huge event. I mean, it's been a little over 3 months. It still reverberates today. They had thousands of students really, gathering in Utah Valley University. And and I know young people who were at that event, having worked with them when they were serving their Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saint missions here. They actually, some of them enrolled there, and they were there for the whole thing, and it was a pretty scary thing for them, because when you have something like that, you have no idea what's going on. It's very chaotic in that kind of situation. But we learned a lot about Charlie Kirk. I mean, I definitely learned more about Charlie Kirk because I hadn't been paying a whole lot of attention. But I have to say that I came away with a lot more admiration for how he was able to, to take up the liberals. You come to him and just ask him a question, prove me wrong. And, he just went toe to toe with person after person. That takes a lot of guts, courage, and intellect to be able to do that. And he's influenced a lot of others since his death that have wanted to say, yeah, we want to be more like Charlie Kirk. We want to do things for this country, because we definitely know that Charlie Kirk was a patriot.
Right. And then, it's like you say, he went on Bill Maher. He went, what they call, the show's called Whatever. It's a talk show that a lot of their guests are like OnlyFans models and stuff. So he went on there, and he talked about, it's a big online hit, and he talked about, he had been addicted to porn, and what he had to do is stop, and why he stopped, and why he thought it was bad, right in the, the valley of the shadow of death, right there with him, right? And went to Oxford and debated people there and so forth. So he was willing to go wherever you were and have a conversation. And, there was a conversation that stopped short of violence, right? We could agree, disagree, agree with the other guy has a point, but still hold our main view, whatever, but nobody was violent, until this guy showed up. So this is the biggest political assassination in the U.S. since who? Because it is a political assassination. He was killed over politics since, I don't know, right? I mean, Kennedy.
Yeah.
There's been one since Kennedy that was bigger than that.
Yeah.
I don't know. So, MRC had a thing out in the last week or so. 30% of college students. Now, this is a guy who's spent all his time on colleges, right? Thought that he was killed by a right winger. Only 4% of college students could correctly say that he was killed by a left winger, right? The rest of them did not know, right? Or they got the question wrong. Overall, I think 27% of Americans thought it was a right winger, but 24% think it's a left winger, and the rest either don't know or aren't sure, right? Or you can't say for sure, or don't believe, or, whatever. So, the left did a really good job of like shedding the blame of this. You had Jimmy Kimmel going out saying, don't let them tell you it's not a right winger. Yeah, it is. It was not a right winger. That's exactly what we should be telling. So you have the biggest political assassination since Kennedy, right? Which maybe not, I was 2 years old when that happened, right? And most people don't even realize like it's a leftist killing a guy of the right, a man of the right. They don't even know that. So the media did a good job of muddling the truth on this. And the guy confessed, and they have the weapon and they fired it. The ballistics match. They're not going to come up with some conspiracy, whatever Candace Owens or whoever says. It was one guy acting alone, and but they've managed to like scramble that message to where they're not responsible. He's not one of them.
Yeah. Oh, Candace Owens.
Yeah. I knew better than that one from the start. I'm proud to say.
Yeah. She's unfortunate. Yeah. The thing too is that, so, this guy takes out Charlie Kirk, unfortunately. And, where the thought process probably is that this guy, is just having too much of a positive effect with our young people. Right.
Right. Yeah. I read the thing the other day. It said it wasn't because of what he was saying. It was because who was listening.
Right.
Right. Yeah. He really had a lot of young people saying, how do I go to church? How do I get involved with God? How do I do better with my family? And, because of him just relentlessly giving that message. And they don't want that. They don't want those intact families because they're not going to vote with you, and they're going to be strong for stuff you're against.
Yeah, as happens, the just getting a
all righty. Thank you, John. I'll be down your way. I'll tell you, maybe we can get together.
So and killing him, really has had the opposite effect of probably the intention, is that there was such a huge groundswell of support, and more people wanted to know about Turning Point USA and Charlie's work and everything like that after his death, after this cold-blooded assassination. Whereas before, a lot of people, you probably had some of those people who didn't really know who shot him, the people who were on the fence or didn't really get, all of a sudden they're like, wait a minute. It's like, what did he do that was so wrong?
Yeah.
And so when you find out what he was doing, you're like, oh, well, this could be good. I can go along to that. There are a lot of young people who are searching for answers and things, and Charlie was providing a way,
that's right,
path for them. So, all right. Number 3, government shutdown, the longest one, I guess, in U.S. history. Republicans, they held pretty firm.
Finally won one.
Yeah, they held firm, right? Yay.
They won. It worked. It did. It worked. The Democrats made completely ridiculous demands. I don't think people realize like how ridiculous what they were asking for. They had all this spending that they took out of not just Obamacare, but a bunch of other stuff, the USAID and whatnot. And their bargaining position was that all that should be restored for them to vote to reopen the government. All the gains that you won in the one big beautiful bill and the rescission, give all that money back, and then we'll talk about reopening the government. And it's like, as Trump said to Zelensky, you don't have the votes. You don't have the cards, right? And they didn't have the cards. And it took some nerve because Republicans start reading, public's getting mad about the shutdown. Public's upset about the shutdown. It's going to reflect on us. And this one time, Trump got behind them and said, don't worry, it's going to be fine. Just wait till it ends. And it did end with, the Democrats. They must have seen some pretty bad internal polling themselves because they saw Trump's numbers going up. Trump was up around 49, 50, 51% on Rasmussen all through this, right? And so they must have said, sitting out here is not helping us take down Trump, and it is not helping us regain power. So they came up with a, please vote on this at some point deal, face-saving agreement. which they voted on it and they lost. It's already lost. So, now there's a new proposal to get it enacted in the House, but they want a shutdown. Trump showed that it can be done. I think that changes a lot of political prospects going forward, because it's always been assumed that if the Republicans, got involved in a shutdown, they would eventually lose. The media would crush them and whatnot. The power of left-wing media is not what it was. Like we talked about, 2020, 5.5 million people watched CNN's election night coverage. In 2024, what was it, 130,000 or something like that. So, I mean, their thing dropped off the map, right? No one's watching, so they have to do a different thing.
Yeah. So, I give the Republicans in general a lot of credit for holding firm on this, particularly because, one of the big things there was healthcare. Democrats really want those healthcare enhanced subsidies to be extended, and the Republicans have been fighting that, more or less tooth and nail. But we just saw some Republicans defect in the House, and the ones in swing districts are feeling a little bit of pressure. But it's still, to me, it's still a messaging problem. Because I have said time and time again, I've received those enhanced subsidies. I was a beneficiary of those Obamacare subsidies, for the last few years before I turned 65. That was great for me. I mean, I could have afforded those payments, but it's like if the government was basically going to pay, 70% of my bill or whatever, I'm like, okay, well, I was like, why am I turning that down?
Right, but they should, no offense, but they shouldn't be paying 70% of your bill.
Right. No. I mean, there isn't a reason. I mean, but it was income based, and and under Biden, the Democrats lifted,
the
the
limit.
cap.
See, that's the thing about it. It's like the program is designed to serve. And the same thing with SNAP. It's designed to serve the poorest 5% of the country. Poorest 5% of the country, you probably got to give them medicine and money to buy food. Right, because for whatever reason they're not going to be able to get it on their own, and we can talk about their excuses and how much of it's their fault and not, and that's kind of an immaterial conversation. But if you don't, the rest of us should not be dependent on government to buy our food and our health insurance, right? And we're going to change how it's delivered. I'm all for that, and make it cheaper to, point of sale and get it out where you're just, most of medicine until you get really old, can be done in a walk-in clinic, right? Most of what happens to you, you fall and hurt your hip. You go up there, they see if it's broke. If it's broke, you might need more serious help. If it's just bruised, they give you some pain medicine, send you home. You don't need a big bureaucracy for that, right? You need the person to be able to access the care quickly, right? And it really doesn't matter, any doctor can read an X-ray, most doctors can, or the kind of people in those places will be able to, so you don't need a specialist and all this. You need a quick read of the situation and an immediate response. And if you need more, it's like Lori had her stroke. We took her to an urgent care. All we knew was she felt weird, right? And they're like, dude, immediately to the hospital. They didn't try to we'll see what we can do and see if that works. They're like, go to the hospital, give them this piece of paper, they'll let you right through, right? And which is exactly what happened. So, like those guys are trained to do it. They're trained to pass on the ones that they got to pass on. So, we need to think about how we deliver it, how we pay for it, and all that stuff. And just giving more money for Obamacare subsidies, that just makes no sense at all. I mean, it's failed program. It can't work without massive subsidies. We're 38 trillion in debt. Let it go.
Yeah. So, what happens along this line is just that you subsidize the plan, then the people on the plan are like, okay, well, I can now afford a better plan, because you're basically paying 70-80% or whatever of the thing. So they're going for that. So, one of the issues, or one of the things, the Democrats are harping on, is like how these premiums are going to skyrocket and all of this. but I contend that that's not really going to be the case. Part of it is too is that these if these people went back to the plan that they had before the subsidies, the enhanced subsidies kicked into place, they were just fine.
Yeah,
They're fine,
that's right.
and they probably took a more expensive plan. In the meantime, while the government was basically paying most of the bill, and now they're like, oh, well, wait a minute. Now we lose that subsidy, so now it's going to cost this. Well, hello, go and find a plan that actually fits your budget like you did before. What were you doing before the government came in and just threw all this money at you? I don't like all these subsidies to begin with, but if the stopgap is more along Trump's lines, Republican lines of like, we will give you some money to go pay for your health plan, if they just cap that based on income or whatever, then maybe these people can be efficient with how they use their healthcare dollars, and that help to control costs a little bit. But they won't see these outrageous premiums that the Democrats are complaining about. They weren't complaining. I don't remember people complaining about them before. They just took the subsidies, and now when the subsidies go away, they're like, "No, you can't do this. It's going to cost. I have to choose between food and medicine or whatever."
Yeah, it's like there's a principal talking the other day. He said, "Okay, my teachers they're required. They get 4 emergency days a year. Okay, well, do you really have in a 180-day school year? Do you really have 4 emergencies? No, not unless you're a pretty emergency centric kind of person, right? Which is its own set of issues, right? So he says, I end up signing these things every day from teachers declaring emergencies that they know is not an emergency, and I know it's not an emergency, but the thing says I have to give them 4 days, so that's what they did. Like if I took all those days away and just said, if you have a legit emergency, I'm going to let it go, right? Which is the human thing to do. Then the other 3 emergencies would never occur, right? You wouldn't have them. I wouldn't be signing slips that we both know are nonsense, right? And you wouldn't, and the teachers would be there, right? So, it's like Heritage. Like when I worked for Heritage, there's no time card. There's no turn in your vacation. It was like, let your boss know so that like they didn't have everybody out of the office the same week or whatever. But you keep up with your time, right? And we expect if we hire somebody of your esteem and your level of class and responsibility that you're going to show up for work every day that you possibly can. And if you're sick, you're going to say, okay, I regretfully missed today, but I am so sick that I cannot help you, right? Okay, so you don't cheat on sick. You don't, no one cheats because you have as much as you need. So I think that's another thing is like if you tell people you got 4 sick days, they're going to be sick 4 days, right? They're going to do it, because you're not trusting them, right? You're tempting them to use their time.
Yeah. All right. Number 2, tariffs. So this is an interesting story to me because we had quote Liberation Day back in April, and people were were thinking there was going to be gloom and doom and everything like that. And as a free market person, I'm not a tariff guy, but Trump, I guess he kind of went on with a little more nuanced view. Is that they threw a lot of tariffs out there, but they also adjusted them and made changes along the way to try to make the tariffs fit the situation. If they overstepped, they pulled back. If they didn't get what they wanted, they used it to ratchet up a little bit and put a little more pressure on some of the countries to equalize trade and things like this. The end result right now is that the drag on the economy that was predicted really hasn't happened. There may be a minor drag in there somewhere, but it's not like it was supposed to, that they were predicting. I mean, we probably would have been in a recession by now, and a lot of these other kinds of things. We're in a fairly good place, even with tariffs. There are definitely some things that cost a lot more money that I would prefer not costing as much money. There are things I don't care about the price of, like the price of coffee, but the price of the tariff on coffee has been huge. if they cut that back, that's fine. If they let it be, that's fine. I don't really have an opinion on that much one way or the other. But I think that they've been adjusting their policy. They've been learning along the way a little bit about how far they can go and what they need to do to get a more balanced trade picture going on there. And once again, I'll refer back to this lunch I had yesterday with an investment advisor. Uh, from his perspective, the tariffs haven't been horrible. The market reacted very negatively back in April, but then it took off after that once they saw how they were applied, and that companies were absorbing a lot of this, at least for the time being. Now, the Supreme Court, I guess, is going to rule on the legality of these tariffs, and we could see some other things come about. Maybe, Trump, the administration may have to refund them or whatever. But even if that comes to be the case, they showed that they had something that was pretty darned effective overall, and surprised the heck out of me.
Right. So, inflation, the inflation report came out this morning, 2.7%, which Kevin Hassett, the chairman of the Council of Economic Advisors, said they looked at 61 predictions of what the inflation would be this month, and every single one of them was higher than 2.7%. I also do not believe there was a single month in the Biden administration where it was below 2.7%. Right. I think it's now lower than Biden ever had it. So, it is working, and he's done it to address, like we've talked about, Canada, 260% tariffs on dairy products. If you look at the northern 100 miles, the first 100 miles from the Canadian border all across the country, it's mostly dairy, right? That's what you can do in that kind of space, is you can have dairy farms. So, the easiest industry for us to export things into Canada effectively blocked it with extremely high tariffs. So Trump punished them, and now they're working something out, because they realize that it'd be better to let us sell some dairy in Canada than it is to try to block us out and pay this other price. Like, these are things. Access to our market is a tremendous asset, and Trump is capitalizing on that. And we're running surpluses. We've run the surplus for 2 straight quarters. We're taking in more money than we're paying out. So, which is a big deal. Like, if you're in debt and debt's growing or whatever, I mean, you're not able to stop all that yet, because you're still paying interest on past mistakes and whatnot. But if you keep coming in with more money than you're putting out, eventually things are going to stabilize, right? You're getting money out of the public sector and into the private sector. So, I think it's working even better than Trump and them thought they would. We're trained, like you say, we're trained on our side to hate stuff like this. It's a government intervention that's about taxes. That's about money, right? That's about money being charged by the government. It's not really a tax. It's a market access fee. But we're kind of trained. We're sort of, to like knee-jerk reaction be against that. But, in fact, it's worked out pretty well. And as you say, now you have wages climbing in the U.S., you have housing getting more available, mortgage rates coming down, all kinds of effects, down the line effects of this. So, I think he's learned to use them strategically. It's another case of where, Trump is very good at, finding levers of executive power that others did not know exist, and using them for the good of the country. And this is a case of that.
Yeah, and wages are growing faster than inflation at this point in time.
Yeah, but twice as fast.
Well, not twice as fast.
Well, it's 5.5 wages and 2.7 inflation as of today.
Well, I thought the last wage thing was about 3.5 versus 3, but before this latest figures came out. But nevertheless, they're moving in the right direction in that one sense. The problem really is at the lower end of the scale, where people are getting pinched a little bit more, because their wages, I don't think, are growing as fast as others, and so that as a result they're having a harder time. But this is something that we've seen for decades. There are always going to be, unfortunately, people who struggle that are in the lower paying jobs and whatnot. Um, all right. So then the last one, number one, and this has been going for a while a little bit, but to me, it picked up a lot of steam this year, which is basically, artificial intelligence mania, as I call it. Uh, we've known about it. It's been on our radars so much for a while, but this year, the amount of money that has been spent by tech companies announced to invest has been just eye popping, mind blowing. Uh, and just, when Oracle announced that they were going to be doing all these AI deals, their stock shot up and actually made Larry Ellison richer than Elon Musk.
Yeah.
Since that point in time, the stock has gone down, I don't know what, 20, 30% or something like that, because they realize it's like, well, where are they going to get the money to build everything out to actually support this? This has been kind of the underlying problem, is that AI requires a lot of spending. You need energy, data centers, all this kind of stuff. We're seeing
Wow.
them, we're seeing them, sign deals for the smaller nuclear power plants and everything like that. Uh, it's been really interesting. Spent a lot of money on salaries for people, paying people incredible amounts of money to come in and work on their AI. Uh, but I get concerned a little bit about how much does AI take over our lives, to the extent of, how many jobs is this replacing? How many, tasks does it do, so that where you find a hard time. So I've got a brother-in-law who lost his job about 3 months ago, and I think, now he's about your age, and so he's, this is also another hurdle, is that your age becomes a barrier, as
Right.
well. I think, you may talk, may people say there isn't an age discrimination issue in there, but tacitly there really is. It's like, how many years are you going to have this person? How long is it going to take them to train them and all those kind of stuff? So that does factor into things. But with him, and then I had a son who lost his job just here about a week ago or so, or 2 weeks ago, and so he's on the hunt, and I think he's got some decent leads. But I'm sitting here going like, you know, is it possible that AI can do some of the tasks he's doing? There's some things it probably can't, because he needs to be on the scene, video, doing his videography and doing these things. But processing a lot of that work, or doing some of those things, large language models could possibly start doing a lot of stuff. What AI can do, is unbelievable, and they keep improving it. I mean, they still have what they call hallucinations, where it's not they're not saying the right thing, or not being very accurate. But if you double check their work, that's one thing to go. Oh, and we got a long one here. I just missed it.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. See, I'm kind of with him on the, especially at the end of that. Um, that, so what, that coffee costs a little more, and it's been addressed. Coffee's coming back down. But as for AI, I think Bob is right there. As for AI, so there's another side to it too. Like, communities are making some long term commitments to this. Like, the data farms, like Prince William County. Prince William County has some of the worst uh, zip codes in the country in terms of traffic, in terms of how long it takes you to commute and so forth. The ones that are like hard up against 66, like there's nothing you can do but go banging your way up 66, right? And those are long, treacherous, long, arduous commutes, right? And they're saying that, rather than invest in businesses and dynamic growth in Prince William County that will change, like in Fairfax, the commuting pattern has changed. You have, it's only something like 23% of the people commute into DC, right? Most of the rest of them they're doing business in Northern Virginia. They're going from one Northern Virginia place to another. So, those are different. You get the spider web commuting patterns, which are more disparate and easier to manage and so forth. Okay. Prince William is saying, we're going to stick with what we got, because, there won't be any factories. There won't be any things where people work there, right? It's a data farm. So you need a lot of water and a lot of energy, and we'll somehow come up with that. And it's the East Coast. We're pretty wet over here. Water's not the huge, we got the Potomac River. It's not the huge challenge that it is other places, right? But it can be. It can, sometimes in the summer we sort of do get a little weird about it. But you're saying for generations, large tracts of your county are not going to be developed, right? They're this thing. The other thing about AI is the ones that, the chats, the ones that concern, they're not solving medical problems or whatever. You're a news bureau, basically. They're people asking you questions and you're giving answers. Okay. Where are they getting their answers? Right. They're getting them from the New York Times, CNN, people like that. They're not getting them from Fox News or Newsmax or anything like that. So when they say, here's everything that's been written about that, it's not really everything that's been written about that. It's everything leftist press, elitist leftist press wrote about it. Okay. So in the future, when we're asking questions, right now, the me's and you's of the world know that and can go around warning people that you're not getting the full story. But eventually we won't be here. And so when you ask that question, you're going to get that set of answers. And it's going to be up to you to discern, that there could be some other answer, or how do I find that answer, or whatnot, right? Because the whole thing, it was the same thing with Google, with the search engines and all that stuff. Their goal is to make an official version of the truth. And if we ask a question, we ask about climate, carbon causes heating, it's just going to ruin the earth. Okay, there's all kinds of dispute of that claim, right? But if if these guys have their way, that's the only claim you'll hear. You won't hear the dispute, right? That's a very dangerous thing. It's technically free speech, but in fact, much of the speech of the country is prevented, right? Is silence. So, it's a serious problem. It's a serious thing we have to think about.
Yeah, well, I mean that's a good point, because with AI, it will give you the answers based on what it's been trained on, right? So
Right.
so yeah,
So
so that's
how
your
it's
point. I
trained
mean,
is very key.
yeah. So if they've been trained on the Washington Post, New York Times, LA Times, whatever, MSNBC, which is MS Now, CNN, that is the tilt of what you will get back in answers. Because I've played around with it and asked it various questions about topics, to see if I get a framework or something, and I'm like, no, I'm not going to use that.
Right.
It's just like, it's like, I know that's just, no, that's not right. So because it definitely comes with its own little tilt, but to the average person, they won't understand that. They have to understand, where the training is, and you take that with a grain of salt and say, what's going on here. But I think it is becoming something that is going to be a larger and larger part of lives. We see we see a lot of layoffs in corporations, and there are a lot of people at the lower levels, I think, that are being replaced by AI. Their chores are being done by artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
Now. So, I mean, there's good things about AI. I mean,
Yeah.
I like to use, self checkouts at Costco, but and other stores, in a lot of cases where they're just.
I always wondered who liked self checkout.
Well, I like it when I've got like one or two items or 20 times, and I can get through a line instead of having to wait behind 10 people. Okay, I don't like.
Fair enough.
That's the kind of thing. Otherwise, I mean, today we were at Costco, but we had a lot of stuff. I'm not going through the self checkout for that. And we had our transaction. I thought we require a regular checker to go through there, but the self checkout, has been popular. But I just saw a study or something. There's somebody that had done a sort of where that the number of people who have stolen from self checkout is pretty high, and they would do it again. So they had, because they, what it is, they everything costs too much, and in their mind they're thinking like these companies can afford it, so they can go ahead and steal from them. Like, you don't understand how thin margins a lot of these companies run on, and then you
Especially
force everybody else to pay more for it.
Groceries is spending $1 zillion to make $1 zillion and $2.
Yeah,
It
right.
is a really low margin business.
So they're now employing more AI to be able to deter theft. If that doesn't work, then they just yank out the self checkout. Then people complain. It's like, look, people stole from the company. They were stealing. They were they were stealing the company blind in essence, and shrink was going up. There's no reason that they should keep going on that if people kept stealing. So we're sorry that
Now
we
you
took
want
away
me to
self.
feel sorry for thieves? Okay,
Yeah,
I can do
sorry.
that.
Yeah, it's like, oh yeah, come on in and just go through self checkout and pretend that you actually paid for things.
Yeah.
No. And anyway, so they're good things that it does. There are a lot of other things that are kind of questionable. We haven't seen the full effect of a lot of these things. I don't know where the end is, but as you said, like you and I who have a little more discernment, we kind of know some things, but the people after us, the younger people, they don't necessarily are going to be in there be able to discern all of that.
That's
So
right.
anyway, all right. Well, that was the end of my list, which I thought was that great. We did a pretty good job here
Yeah.
with that.
Yeah.
We made a show out of it. I'll hear one more comment. Well, oh wait a minute, got a couple more comments.
Mm. Yeah, that's right. That's right.
And then, right, Scan
Yeah.
and Go. If you haven't tried that in Sam's Club, is actually pretty good. They've actually used their technology at Sam's Club is such that they can tell when you've used the app to scan the items, pay for the items, and then walk out. They know that you paid for the items. So they have technology that they have implemented in their stores that apparently is working very well. They really tried to push people to that direction. I think Giant Food tried to do something similar, but their technology wasn't up to snuff, and I don't think they're doing that same thing quite to the extent that they were. So anyway, thank you for your comments today. Really appreciate that. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. Hope as always, please, as always, stay safe and stay well. Remember, you live in the greatest country in the world. Do not let anyone tell you otherwise. And as always, God bless America. And we will see you on New Year's Eve when we come back again and catch up with some of the news. But in the meantime, as always, same thing here too. As Brian started out, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, and Happy New Year. And we'll see you again.